When Apple released their 6th generation iPod Nano, I decided to turn it into a wristwatch. I would do this via the lost wax casting process, where I will use the aluminum iPod housing to mock up a positive prototype, of which I will make a negative silicone mold to make a positive wax model to cast in plaster, which will be put in a furnace to burn away the wax, leaving a negative, into which I will cast the gold positive, which will then be cut, filed, polished, and buffed into a gold watch housing, at which point I can craft and attach the wristbands before filling the watch with the iPod guts. Here, let me just show you how I'll do it.
This is a 6th generation Apple iPod Nano. I use heat to soften the adhesive holding down the glass, and using this plastic spudger tool, I gently pry the glass away from the iPod chassis. Removing this thin EMI shield will allow access to the electronics inside. After disconnecting the LCD and digitizer, I can then remove the display assembly. Using the plastic spudger once again and some gentle prying, I can remove the battery and the logic board fairly easily. After a few quick screws, the clip slides right off the back. It's just a few more screws to remove the volume controls and the power button, which come out with the headphone jack. Here I hand carve the wax lugs so I can mock up a prototype watch chassis. The silicone and catalyst must be carefully weighed out in a predetermined ratio, then mixed thoroughly before they are vacuumed to release any trapped air bubbles. Once the silicone is fully cured, the prototype watch chassis can be removed from the mold. Wax is heated to 165 degrees Fahrenheit and poured over the mold, while a probe is used to remove air bubbles from the small crevices inside. Once cooled, I remove the wax replica from the mold and trim off any excess wax. The casting plaster is pre-weighed and mixed with water before it is vacuumed to remove any trapped air bubbles. It is then carefully poured over the wax replica in a way so as to not entrap any more air bubbles. Finally, the flask is tapped with a hammer to gloss off the surface. To make the Burnout oven, I first lay down a bed of fire brick onto which I place my KO chimney, which is supported by a chicken wire frame. I then add a layer of aluminum foil as backup insulation and pour in perlite to insulate the furnace floor. I place the heating element inside and set my flask in place before putting on the lid. I wire the heating element to the power supply, put the temperature probe in place, and slowly take the furnace up to 1400 degrees Fahrenheit over the course of 5 hours. During this process, the wax model will vaporize and burn out of the flask, leaving a negative of the model in the casting plaster. The best way for me to get high purity gold is to melt down coins that are minted to 4/9 fine. I mix a master alloy with my pure gold to make it 18 karat. I put the flask in the cradle and remelt the gold before spinning the casting machine. As the centrifugal casting machine spins up to 600 RPM, it applies over 60 Gs of force to the gold, pushing it into every nook and cranny in the mold before the metal cools. I then quench the 1000-degree flask in a water bath. The plaster disintegrates in the cool water due to its catastrophic thermal contraction, allowing me to recover my casting. It took a while, but I finally got through all the spruing with my jeweler's saw. Then there is quite a bit of coarse cleanup to do with a set of jeweler's files. This is followed by polishing with fine sandpaper to bring out the shine. Next, I work on the inside, grinding and shaping it so the iPod components will fit perfectly in place. A few blemishes, which I will repair with solder, were exposed during polishing. In order to prep the gold chassis for solder, I first dip the piece into a shielding solution. I then burn off the solvent, which leaves behind a protective coating. After flexing the piece, I carefully place a solder chip over the blemish. I then heat the area evenly until the chip melts in. For a heat treatment, I set the oven to 500 degrees Fahrenheit and leave the watch chassis in there for 90 minutes. I use a heated solution of diluted sulfuric acid as a pickling agent to clean off the surface oxides left behind from casting and soldering. The process takes 10 minutes, but here I've sped it up. Finally comes buffing, which begins by cutting with Tripoli and ends by coloring with rouge to produce a mirror finish. To make the wrist strap, I cut out a thin strip of leather and folded it in half, using rubber cement to keep it together. I set my template over the strap and use a powder to transfer the pattern. Using a sewing machine, I stitched the strap together according to my pattern. I rounded the corners with my Dremel tool and then inserted the spring bars into the ends of the straps. Finally, I compressed the spring bars and slipped the straps in place between the lugs on the watch chassis. To install all of the electronic components into my gold iPod wristwatch chassis, I begin with a headphone jack and carefully mount the attached power button and volume controls in place. Then I set the logic board into position and slip the battery in right behind it. I plug the display connectors into their sockets and set the EMI shield in place above the logic board. I dab on a layer of glue around the edge of the frame and then lay the display down into the bezel.
You're not really here. I don't wanna be either. I wanna be next to you. Black and gold, 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 black and gold.